Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, the answers to your questions. A week or so ago, I put out there that I want you to send me some of your questions. I mentioned that it's gotten hard for me to respond to everybody's comments on the video, so send me some questions. You did. I was going to answer them in a live stream, but I thought, man, there were so many great questions and wanted to make sure I was able to give them my attention. So I thought I would just make a video for it. So, all right, let's jump right in. I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name or your YouTube, your YouTube name. So Andrea Jerka asks, best sounding albums. Unfortunately, I think the best sounding albums all came out of the 70s. If we're talking sound as in sonics, production, mixing, and all that kind of stuff, I think the best sounding albums came out of the 70s. Albums like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Fleetwood Mac, Tusk, or Rumors, let's see, Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell, Alan Parsons Project, I, Robot. Now, I think that there's good sounding albums that have a really cool vibe to them. Like, for instance, the first Black Sabbath album has a real atmosphere to it that I think is great. For the 80s, I would say from a sonic sound standpoint, a lot of the LA bands had really great sounding albums like Rat and Motley Crue, like Dr. Feelgood, and albums like that sonically sounded really good. I like Martin Birch. His productions are usually pretty simple, but they're real punchy and really, I like them. Albums like Blue Oyster Cult, Cultosaurus Erectus, Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell, and Mob Rules. So there's some albums I think sonically sound really good. Atomic Duck asks, are you a Matt Pike fan with Sleep and High on Fire catalog? Have a favorite stoner metal band? I'm not a huge High on Fire band, and I'm not sure why. I mean, I like what they do. It's just, they're just not a band that I've delved into a lot, but I do really like Sleep. And I have all the Sleep either on vinyl or on CD. I was into them really early on, like Sleep's Holy Mountain, Jerusalem, the album with one long song on it. I like their latest album quite a bit. I have that on vinyl. I think that that's great. So I do really like Sleep. And favorite stoner band, I'm more of a doom guy, so the bands for me have a little bit of a doom element to them. So I like Sleep. I like Electric Wizard, if you'd even consider them stoner. Maybe they're more kind of doom. Maybe, who's the other band? Caius. I'm really a big Caius fan. They're sort of a founding fathers of that sound. So, Rich Billionaire, why did Iron Maiden keep 3 guitarists? Doesn't 3 guitars make the bass sound lower? As a bassist, do you feel the bass sound is impacted by 3 guitars? That's an interesting question. I think that they kept. What happened was Adrian left the band, Yannick Gers came in. When Adrian came back, I think that they felt some loyalty to Yannick, so they kept Yannick there. And also, Yannick is a good songwriter. He does contribute a lot to the songwriting. And I think on the studio recordings, it does sort of clutter up the sound, and I prefer Iron Maiden when it was one guitar on one speaker, one guitar on the other, and the bass right in the middle. The bass jumped out a lot more. And I think on their live recordings, the bass gets a little buried when you've got that third guitar, because what do you do with the third guitar? Do you put it in the middle of the stereo mix, or where do you put it? And so, yeah, I think it does kind of clutter up the mix. It does add for some interesting things that they can do, though, especially now with the progressive rock direction that they've sort of gone in the last so many records. John Croce, is there going to be another Majesty and Ruin album? Majesty and Ruin is an epic doom metal band that I do. Unfortunately, I'm in Florida. The singer is in New Jersey, so it's a little difficult. We do everything online. If you hear the intro music to my videos, those are little excerpts from a Majesty and Ruin song. Yeah, we plan on working on some more stuff. It's a kind of a slow process for us. We sort of take our time with it. But yes, we do have plans on doing some more stuff. I can't really say any kind of date. Hopefully sooner rather than later. In My House 11, any Layer of the Alchemist t-shirts coming? Yeah, it's something I am working on. I'm working on a design first. I want to come up with something really cool for a t-shirt. I've been talking to my friend Steve over at All the World's a Stage. He has a merchandise company and a YouTube channel, the same name. And he's been giving me some advice with t-shirts, how to go about doing that and everything. So hopefully in the next couple months, yes, I will have some t-shirts and merchandise for everybody. Old NYZ, here's a fun one, but I often find difficult. All-time faves. My favorite hard rock band, AC/DC. My favorite metal band, Black Sabbath. If you're gonna, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, all three-way tie for first place. Southern rock band. I'm going to say Leonard Skinner. I actually really like the first Leonard Skinner album, and I've wanted to do some videos on them. Prog, if I have one. Yeah, Yes is my favorite progressive band, and Fragile's probably my favorite album from them. Favorite all-around band? I'd have to say Black Sabbath. All right, let's see here. Move my questions. My questions, oh, there we go. All right, Joe Dredd, if you were trapped on a desert island with an iPod with only enough battery to listen to 2 more songs forever, which ones? Oh, man. AC/DC, Let There Be Rock, because AC/DC is so important to me, my first favorite band, and Revelation Mother Earth from Ozzy, one of my favorite songs of all time, or maybe Diary of a Madman by Ozzy. I don't know. Okay, I'll go with Revelation Mother Earth. And he asks also, in defense of Another Perfect Day, I'm guessing the Motorhead album. Honestly, I'm not as familiar with Motorhead after Iron Fist. It's like those 3, 4, 5 albums after Iron Fist. I sort of know them, but I don't know them really well. I do. Then I sort of got back on with Motorhead in the last like 4 or 5 albums that they put out. So it's not an album I'm super familiar with. I'm going to have to listen to it more and check it out. Mr. Time Lord, congrats on 1 year on YouTube. Thank you. What is one era of any band that you wish would have gone on longer than it did? Ooh. I wish that the Kiss makeup era, classic Peter Criss, Ace Frehley era. I wish that Roger Waters had stayed with Pink Floyd. Ozzy with Black Sabbath, I guess, but then we wouldn't have gotten Ronnie James Dio. So, yeah, tough question. I'll say some of those, like Schenker with UFO. I wish he could have stuck around with UFO. Kiefer Livingston. What are the defining qualities of the genres and decades of music since the 1950s? What impact did they have on the world and you, in your opinion, of course? Wow, okay. That would be a great topic for a video because this is something I could go really in depth in. But just to go over quickly, real like sort of milestone moments for me in rock and hard rock and heavy metal would be the mid 1950s when you had Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry. That's sort of the birth of rock and roll, and I think that's very important. I'm actually a fan of that stuff. I love like the really early days of rock and roll when rock and roll was being born. Then the next big milestone would be the late 60s where you have Hendrix, Cream, the Yardbirds, the Doors all coming up. So influential, so important to set up the 70s. And then the 70s for me are the golden age of hard rock, the classic era. All these great, unique bands, everything from Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Rainbow, Thin Lizzy, UFO. Did I mention UFO? Just so many, Pink Floyd, so many great bands, and so many bands pushing the boundaries of music, discovering what you could do with hard rock and the musicianship, the production, the concepts, and the songwriting, and just everything. The 80s for me is sort of the golden era of classic metal. This is where in the 70s you have the bands that were influencing the metal bands. 1980 for me is when metal really crystallizes and becomes heavy metal as we know it. This is the era of Iron Maiden and Accept and Judas Priest and Merciful Fate and all those kind of classic bands, plus the more melodic bands like Rat and Motley Crue and stuff like that. The 90s for me, besides grunge and the first wave of grunge, which I really like and means something to me, is also a time for extreme metal, death metal, black metal. 2000s for me is when it's the explosion of subgenres, doom metal and all these little offshoots, and then people going back and listening to what came before them and incorporating all these different elements like melodic death metal and stuff like that. And the 2000s and beyond, that's where I sort of lose track of what's going on. So really the eras that mean the most to me are like 55 to, let's say, 95. All right. Anthony W., suggestions for a record player setup. Yeah, okay. I'm going to do a video on this because I think I can give some decent advice. I'm not an audiophile, but I am into getting, you know, nice equipment. And for people who are getting into buying a record player, who want to get into this, but that aren't comfortable committing, you know, of course, like anything else, you can spend an insane amount of money on a record player. But if they just want to kind of see if they like it, I always tell them, try to get a record player where the cartridge, which is what the needle is attached to, and the cartridge can be upgraded. So that way, if you get into it and you're into it, a great upgrade is your cartridge. The cartridge has a lot to do with the sound of your record player. The other important thing is to make sure the record player has a weight on the back of the arm and anti-skate knob. That helps prevent the record player from the needle from either going too far into the groove, damaging the record, or sliding across the record. Now after that, there's other considerations you have to keep in mind. A record player needs a phono input, or you need to buy a separate preamp. So Audio-Technica, for instance, and I actually wrote this down, Audio-Technica, the 120X is a turntable for $279 that comes with a preamp built inside it. You can Bluetooth from it, so you can use headphones or Bluetooth speakers. It has all the other things I described, and you can upgrade from it. I have a Fluence RT85. The lower model of that is the RT80, which is a real nice turntable for $199, and that you can upgrade on that as you see fit. Project makes nice introductory turntables. I would say you got to spend at least $150 to $200 to get started with something decent that's going to sound good, that you can upgrade if you want, if you start really getting into it. Receivers, I tell people, I don't know a lot about modern receivers. I've always had older receivers. I'm a fan of Pioneer 70s receivers. There's a lot of hi-fi places and even record stores. There's a record store near me that I go to, that Sound Exchange here in Tampa, where they buy and restore old receivers. So I tell people to find somewhere like that. Buying stuff like this off of Craigslist or used is dangerous, because at the minimum it's going to need to be cleaned up, and you're going to probably have some dirty connections and stuff. So if you can find somebody that's refurbished it, that can maybe give you a 1-year warranty or something, that's a good way to go. So, all right, there's the quick part of it, but I'm going to do a video and get more into that. Vinyl Solution, what bands, unreleased live concert album would you want to see unearthed the most? Which tours, album cycles? 2 or 3 LP vinyl, of course. Yes, of course. You know, a lot of bands, and for instance, Black Sabbath, I would have said some of the soundboard recordings that Black Sabbath has, but they've been putting out that now. Like, I just got the Sabotage box, and there's an awesome recording in there. There's a show from their Technical Ecstasy tour I'd like to see them put out. Anything Ozzy has with Randy Rhoads, or I wish he would put out some live stuff from the Jakey Lee era, because I love Jakey Lee. Would love some more live Pink Floyd from their various eras. Kiss, I wish they would put out more live, proper live stuff from their 70s era, like the albums in between a Live 1 and a Live 2, maybe like the Rock and Roll Over tour, or, you know, whatever, like just anything from that 70s era I think would be really cool. Okay. Jonathan Lundeen, are you and your Sabbath co-host interested in bootlegs? So yes, me and Darren, my co-host on Into the Void of Black Sabbath podcast, Darren's really into it. He's got a huge collection. He's got them all out on CDs. He downloads the stuff from the internet. I've got the stuff that's the popular soundboard stuff. I have that stuff on CD or either on vinyl. I don't go as deep into it as Darren does, because nowadays you can just watch these concerts, listen to them on YouTube and stuff like that. But it is something I wish I had more, like Tony Martin era bootlegs, for instance. Sammy Orr, favorite obscure traditional heavy metal album. Oh, I got a couple. Death Dealer, Keeper of the Flame, very Iron Maiden traditional metal like. Battle Axe, Power from the Universe, a little bit of a new wave of British heavy metal vibe. I've talked about Warlord here on this channel, Deliver Us, I love that album. Cirith Ungol, I'm a big fan of Cirith Ungol. So those are just a few off the top of my head. Ed Herzog, what's your biggest concert disappointment? Man, you know, a lot of them are disappointments were the result of bad sound. For instance, I saw Yngwie in the 90s and the sound was just so loud, such a mess, I couldn't even tell what he was playing. That was a disappointment. Same thing happened with Halloween. I saw them on the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise. My wife and I went on this Monsters of Rock cruise, and there were a couple of bands that I was really disappointed in. Black and Blue, I thought I was going to like them. They were terrible. The band themselves sounded terrible. I saw Exciter on the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, and out there just having a bad set, but they sounded kind of messy and sloppy, and I wasn't into them. So those are a couple off the top of my head. Mike G, New Wave of British Heavy Metal show. Yeah, I just sent you a comment about that. I love the New Wave of British Heavy Metal stuff. I'm just trying to think of what the best way to go about that, of maybe a 10 favorite albums from that era or essential albums or something like that. So yes, I will be doing some NWO BHM stuff. He also asks, another one, a different one from I Love Heavy Metal, Metal Rules. I have a question. What do you think about the early Pink Floyd, like pre-Dark Side of the Moon era? I love it. I'm a big fan of Obscured by Clouds and metal, especially more. Yeah, even like Umaguma. I like the Syd Barrett stuff. I like the first album. I kind of go in phases where sometimes I'm into the more Animals, Wish You Were Here. Other times I'm into more that middle period, like Metal or Obscured by Clouds. And then other times I really like the Syd Barrett, like the first album, or Saucerful of Secrets. So I love all eras of Pink Floyd. Okay, Metal Dama, please tell us what rock stars you've met and a story or two about the meetings. I haven't met a whole ton of rock stars, to be honest with you, but I did have one or two. My wife and I were in a diner, and right in the booth right behind us was Alice Cooper. And so my wife tapped him on the shoulder, and we talked to him for about 10 minutes. That was pretty cool. I met Bruce Springsteen. He was coming out of a Tower Records in LA, and he looked just like you'd expect Bruce to look. He had jeans on, a white t-shirt, a baseball hat, some records under his arm. He had he got in his pickup truck afterwards, you know, and left. The only thing more American would have been if he was eating a hot dog maybe, or drinking a Coca-Cola. But he stopped for a couple minutes, you know, super friendly. One big person I saw outside of the rock world that I met was Tupac. I used to teach at an inner city school in Washington, D.C., and Tupac came and talked to the kids at the school. And afterwards, he was kind of hanging around talking to the teachers. And I just, you know, talked to him, said I enjoyed his little talk to the kids and everything, and shook his hand and just stood there for a little while and listened to him talk. I wish I had gotten a picture with him. This was the day before his cell phone, so... All right, Maximilian, 200 HP. You could prevent one lineup change in the history of music. What would it be? Doesn't matter if it's from a member's death, drama in the band, or whatever. Well, if it was a death-related thing, I would want Randy Rhoads to have stuck around with Ozzy Osbourne. If it was a non-death related thing, it might be for Roger Waters to have stayed with Pink Floyd and to have worked that out, you know. I was going to say Ozzy with Black Sabbath, but then we wouldn't have gotten Dio. I would have loved to have Vivian Campbell stay with the Dio band. So, all right, there you go. Answers to your questions. Hopefully I answered everybody's questions. I know with the comments I've mentioned, it's hard for me to stay on top of the comments. So this was a lot of fun. I'm still going to do a live stream at some point, do some giveaways where we can celebrate the 2,000 subscribers and the 1-year anniversary of the channel. So again, thank you everybody out there for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all your comments and for your questions here. And until I see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.